Hi, welcome to Facebook Live again with Wild Heritage Backyard with Becca. Today we are celebrating National Pollinator Week 2018 in our butterfly garden. You can only see the back half behind me, but here at Heritage Farm we have a pollinator garden that is in the shape of a butterfly. Butterflies are one of the most popular pollinators, but there are all kinds of different pollinators that we're celebrating this week all around the U.S. Butterflies, bees, flies, different kinds of flies, dragonflies and fireflies, and also hummingbirds. And in the Southwest, not quite so much here, we have nocturnal pollinators that get flowers that bloom at night in the desert, such as moths and bats. So there are all kinds of pollinators that deserve appreciation. But I keep saying this big word, pollinator. What does that even mean? I feel like you hear it thrown around all the time, but nobody really quite understands what exactly is pollination unless you've heard someone explain it to you. So let's think of my hand as a hummingbird right now. So I'm flying over to this beautiful spider plant, and I'm getting a drink of nectar. Nectar is a sugary water that is in the inside of the tubule of a flower. That is what their sugar, like their carbs, are. But then there's pollen that's on the anthers of a flower, which are the sticky uppy parts here around the flower. And their pollen gets attached to the bodies of pollinators. Some pollinators actually consume the pollen, and it's like the protein. So the nectar is like the sugar and the pollen is like their protein. But a lot of pollinators also just get it all over their bodies. And when you travel from this flower to this flower, the pollen from this flower goes with the pollinator to this flower. Whether they mean to or not isn't the question. It's a natural process that happens. Pollen is the fertilizer of seeds. Pollen is what helps the seed be able to reseed and make more flowers. So it is pollination in and of itself that breeds plants. Now, some pollination is done by wind, like a popular crop like corn. It doesn't even need pollinators to pollinate. The wind blows the pollen and it cross-pollinates the crop. But some really popular major crops that are pollinated by pollinators are apples, cherries, bananas, mangoes, all of these things that we consume like fruits, a pollinator has made possible. And also all these beautiful wildflowers are made possible by pollinators. So a good analogy of like your everyday life, say you're snacking on Doritos, so that cheese dust gets all over your fingers and everything you touch the cheese dust comes off on. That's exactly what happens to pollinators. When they're eating the nectar, the pollen dust gets all over them and then everything they touch, the pollen comes off on. So that helps make that big word, pollinator, make a little bit more sense. So I told you that bees, butterflies, bats, flies, and hummingbirds are all pollinators, but today we're going to talk a little bit about probably the most popular pollinator. Now here at Heritage Farm we do have a hive, but our hive, something crazy kind of happened. The queen bee, who is the ruler bee, actually deceased, and the new queen that she laid was infertile. So she was not able to continue having eggs. So all of our bees left the hive. So I'm going to be demonstrating with you for an artificial hive today. Bees are really complicated to keep alive in artificial hives. Beekeepers work really hard at making it happen. So I'm going to give you a glimpse of what a beekeeper would do to harvest honey. So I kind of look like a ghost right now. But the reason why I'm wearing this is obviously what are bees most famous for? Probably stinging. And a lot of people are like, oh, I'm allergic to bees, I hate bees. Well, guess what? If you don't appreciate bees and all they do for you, you probably wouldn't be having a lot of what you're having for lunch today. Because even in a roundabout way, you can pretty much connect bees and their pollination efforts in our area to almost everything you eat that is naturally occurring. So obviously not your Doritos, but you know. So before we enter the hive here, I'm going to show you a couple pictures up close of a bee's life. This is what pollination looks of a bee really up close. This is a great picture. You can see the bee shooting its tongue down to get nectar, okay? But then what you also see is this little yellow dust all over the place. That is pollen. And this big sack right here is its pollen bag. And that is in its back legs that they actually can collect. It's designed for collecting the pollen on, because bees actually eat the pollen. It is their protein, and they mix it with their saliva to help in the nectar to make honey. So pollen is super important to the bees, not just the plants. And they feed it to each other. So this is a worker bee who's just gone out from the outside and into the hive, feeding the drone bees who stay in the hive all the time with the pollen and the nectar. Queen bee she is the largest bee, only one who lays eggs. Thousands of babies that are all hers. Worker bees are all female, and then the drone bees stay in the hive and work within the hive. They have to grow from this tiny little worm, doesn't even look like a bee, to a ready to be an adult bee. So much pollen provided by the other bees, 5 times their size in 16 days. We all love honey. Honey is the byproduct of the bees take the nectar they get from flowers, they spit it out into honey cells, and that's the yummy thing we eat. That's why it's so sugary. Nectar is sugar water, and that's why honey from different areas or different types of flowers actually tastes different, because it's a different tasting nectar. So before I would enter the hive, I've got my gear on so that I don't get stung. I have got my gloves on to protect my hands, and I've got this smoker. This is an old-fashioned one. We're here at Heritage Farm where we have antiques. A real beekeeper today would not use something that looks like this. It's so much more fancier, but we're gonna use the cool antique version. So this is a smoker. You would actually start a little fire in here. You would take off the lid and start a little fire in here, and then use these bellows to pump to blow out the smoke. It makes them lose their sense of smell. And bees, when they're scared of danger, emit a pheromone, which is a hormone that has a smell that alerts all the others. Sting something, we are in trouble. Or swarm something, we are in trouble. But if you pump smoke, all they can smell is the smoke, and they think their hive is on fire. So that causes them to lose all instinct other than, we need to save the hive and get out that honey by taking it out. And taking out the honeycombs and taking it away to be. We don't only use honey from bees either. We also use their beeswax. We pretty much use everything and keep harvesting the combs one by one. So this is really hot. So I am going to take this off and just talk to you for about one more thing for a second here. Something else we're going to do here at Heritage Farm in honor of National Pollinator Week. Whew. I don't know how the beekeepers do it. Is our Pollinator Hotel. Now this is something you could easily make at home. And so this could provide a habitat for bees, mostly bees, but sometimes other pollinators will also make homes in this. And you can hang it near your garden, and it will actually promote more bees to be around your garden to pollinate your flowers. They could pollinate their crops, and also a lot of beekeepers like apples. They'd put these around an apple orchard that they have on their bee farm, and they would foster the bees only bringing back apple blossom honey. You could help bees have habitat because they are having declining numbers, and it's really important that we can keep our pollinators around, or we're going to have some major food crises. So we're going to hang one here for National Pollinator Week 2018. And on Saturday, if you would like to come out, Wild Heritage is going to be making your own little planters out of recyclable materials and planting a pollinator power pack of seeds inside of them to take home and set in your backyard. Thanks for joining.